Good afternoon to you. Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion. It is now August 20th, 2019, and instead of talking about how so much of the hurricane season is still in front of us, that today marks the official, sort of unofficial start to the real hurricane season and all of that, these are things you already know. So instead of going over that again, let's just jump right into the discussion, shall we? That's what we're here for. So let's get on with it. Starting in the Pacific, this is where things are trying to light up. Even the Pacific has been struggling as of late. Not much action going on at all in the Western Pacific, and the Eastern Pacific not nearly as busy as I think people thought it would be. And of course the Atlantic has been very quiet so far in the month of August, but we still have 11 days to go. It's only the 20th, and we have 31 days in August, remember. And as such, in the Pacific, what's happening here can sometimes eventually have a bearing on what happens in the Atlantic, because the favorability kind of shifts from west to east. Not always, but once things calm down in the Pacific, they usually start to pick up in the Atlantic. That being said, we do have these two systems. Invest 95E right here. 90% chance this will go on to develop almost certainly. This one's 97E. I guess, again, like I said yesterday, 96E came and went rather quickly, I suppose. Now this has been reduced. Remember yesterday these were both red, so this is now down to medium chance of development. And so it's interesting that we can't even guarantee development with these systems out here in the Eastern Pacific, where their hurricane season was forecast to be above average from NOAA. I don't know if anybody else issues Eastern Pacific forecasts, but it's been kind of ho-hum out there compared to where it could be. This system will go on to develop 95E, and depending on which model you look at, it may or may not directly impact portions of the Baja Peninsula up here. So we'll have to watch this on a daily basis to see how that pans out. Meanwhile, way up here in the North Atlantic, we call these invest areas just like we do in the Pacific. Same numbering system, 90 through 99, and this one happens to be 97. Invest area 97L. The L is for Atlantic. The E, when you have like a 95E or whatever, that's for Eastern Pacific. And it shows only 10%, but boy, it was looking pretty organized this morning, and it wouldn't surprise me if later on they go back and say, you know, that 97L was briefly a tropical storm or a tropical depression. It was riding along the edge of the Gulf Stream up here, and as I have showed you on our temperature maps, the 80-degree water extends up here not far from Nova Scotia. So, and I'll show you the satellite picture here, but it was, you could argue, you know, if it had been right here off the coast, I guess closer to land, perhaps it would have gotten named. I don't know. I don't ever like to wade into the why do they name things waters, because that is not what I do. That's the National Hurricane Center's job. But it was looking pretty healthy. Kind of still is. Looks like a sheared, I mean, there it is right there. Kind of looks like a sheared, and it is. You can see that rounded edge. It's a sheared cyclone up in the far northern latitudes over warm water. I mean, you could argue that that's a tropical depression or a tropical storm up over northern latitudes. It originated from an old piece of energy that came off the United States, North American continent there, so whatever. Notice too, folks, that we do have now more convection on the satellite imagery here. Again, this is from Tropical Tidbits. There's a lot more convection in the Western Hemisphere as a whole, especially out here in the Eastern Atlantic. This is the first time we've really seen this sort of flare up. It's starting to have that look overall, that we're mixing out that dry air. The sinking motion is going to sort of release itself a little bit over the coming days, little by little, and eventually the Atlantic looks like it's going to light up and be quite busy as we get into especially September and probably lasting into October. But for now, not much going on for sure, though a increase in overall convection. You can see 95E in the Pacific here, tropical wave in the Northwest Caribbean Sea off the coast of Belize. This could try to sneak in and maybe do something. We'll talk about that in a moment. You folks up here in the Northwest Gulf are going to want to keep an eye on it because it's going to bring impacts. Whether or not it becomes a cyclone, a tropical cyclone, we get hung up on these names. Is it a depression? Is it a storm? Is it a hurricane? Those are just labels that we give these things. And they do matter, don't get me wrong, but also all that very heavy rainfall in just a tropical disturbance, we have to keep all of this in perspective in terms of impacts, not only to land areas and the people who live on those land areas, but offshore interests as well, marine interests, etc. And of course in the Gulf of Mexico, that includes the petrochemical industry. We don't want to forget about that. And any organized area of convection that rolls through there can be problematic. Meanwhile, again, in the tropical Atlantic over here, I don't know why it's drawing an arrow for me. Come on, give me my pointer back. Thank you. In the tropical Atlantic, a little bit of a different look overall. This is curious. Hey, my Windows 10 talking to me back there. Curious to me because the GFF's still trying to create something out of this as it heads towards the Windward Islands over the next few days. I'm not going to show that today because I want to see if it's persistent. We will look at some other modeling, though, in just a moment from the Euro. Shifting west just a little bit to show you, this is 97E, there's 95E. And just to kind of shift gears a little bit to lower 48 weather, look at that. And you go, look at what? Exactly. Wow. The monsoon, where is it? I mean, there's nothing at all. No cloud cover. I mean, holy cow. I've got this real deep interest in southwest monsoon action, especially when tropical cyclones develop in the eastern Pacific and they wind their way up here, and they do that sometimes. I'm not saying that 95E is going to do that, but this is remarkable. And as such, it is friggin' hot out there. Extreme heat warnings, etc. in that area. But man, for August, for this to be so dry, very interesting. I wonder if there's any correlation when the monsoon is non-existent. And, does that mean that the overall pattern in the Western Hemisphere is drier? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm reaching here, but it is interesting. You have to think about it. The one really amazing thing about this, you could go out to the desert well west of Phoenix or whatever, and at night, boy, I bet that's absolutely incredible. I would love to do that. Too bad I can't just hop on a flight to Phoenix for like $50 round trip and go do that. That would be neat. So look at this interesting tweet today from our friend down in New Zealand, Ben Knoll, that the massive, he really put that adjective on there, the massive sinking branch of the Walker circulation, this is part of your circulation patterns in meteorology, that has silenced the Atlantic tropics, is forecast to fade during mid-September with the potential for increasing activity into October. Now, we saw a very similar thing last year. And I did not go dig up those tweets to show you, but if you remember, and it's even in my documentary, the 2018 Tracking the Hurricanes film, very similar overall message from Ben around this time last year. In fact, a year ago, I was getting ready to go to Hawaii for Hurricane Lane. And while I was there, Ben was talking about this uptick in activity that was forecast for September. Granted, it was a little earlier in September that was looking like it would happen, towards the end of August into parts of early September. And of course, Florence, the fledgling system that became Florence, moved off the coast of Africa right at the end of August there. We had Gordon that formed in very early September, and then Florence came across. It took so long that the pattern kind of changed a little bit, and luckily for North Carolina, Florence weakened on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and whatever. The rest is, of course, history. We had another uptick, which gave us Michael in October. Interesting that he's saying a very similar type thing, that look for an increase in activity heading into September and October, which of course, and I'll allude back to the whole, well, it's August 20th and you know what that means, but it's true, folks. It means that we're getting closer to this idea that this would ramp up during the traditional peak to the season. So I like it on Twitter that I can pause these GIF movies, these GIF animations. I just click on it and it pauses it. That's pretty cool. I wish I could just do that everywhere. Like if I tweeted, I wonder if I tweeted one of Levi's GIF animations, if I clicked on it, it would pause it. I'll have to try that sometime. I should set up a private Twitter account that nobody can follow, where I just tweet GIF animations that I want to pause. Yeah, that'd be neat. Yeah, hell, if you want to follow them, whatever. Anyhow, easily distracted today by interesting things with technology. But it's true. Here's what I want to show you. There's August 2019, and in this case, and Ben makes it real easy to figure all this out, less convection. It's sinking motion, part of the Walker circulation in the atmosphere, the ups and downs of how air rising in one area sinks in another. More convection on the left side. Another way to look at this is the velocity potential anomaly, the VPA here, and lots of interpretations of how to, this is a thematic map, by the way. When maps show something, other than like how to get somewhere, these are different themes. In this case, that's showing your velocity potential. And there's August with all the, we'll just put a big X for the Atlantic basin, and generally speaking, check marks for these areas. Although it doesn't mean that we've had like tons and tons of activity in the Pacific, right? You know that we've had a little bit, but nothing overwhelming. So we'll see. Maybe things will change. So there's August. Now look at what September shows. As we get into September, it's it backs off a little bit in the Atlantic basin, starts to set up shop here in the Pacific more towards the Central Pacific. So Hawaii, look out. But then, as we get from September into October, look what happens. It shifts into the Atlantic, overall favorable in the Atlantic, but all the while, you see this happening. We go back to August, September, October. For the most part, this area here on this Mercator map, Africa and the Indian Ocean, generally are favorable. There's the Indian Ocean there with upward motion, meaning that we're going to get these tropical waves that'll be energized and they'll come off into an ever-increasing environment the farther west they track. So we'll see a slow uptick in activity, I do believe, followed by, once we get into September and through probably a good deal of October, we're going to have a longer season. Or maybe it's kind of shifted. That's the way to look at it. So forget August. We'll still probably have a couple of things. I'm not buying that we're going to get all the way through August with no named storms. It's hard to do. It really is. Not impossible, and yes, there's some confirmation bias there that it's so hard to do. But then September and October, look out. And one of our members to our HurricaneTrack Insider site, a real good friend of ours, Michael Cornelius, who runs flhurricane.com, Florida Hurricane, was mentioning on our chat today, one of the byproducts here of not having any activity, not even any of these so-called junk storms, is the water is all undisturbed across most of the Atlantic basin, right? We haven't had any fish storms churning up the water. So the water temperatures are going to be at their maximum potential coming off the summer peak here. You know, there's this lag. We already had the longest day, and now the days are getting shorter, but the oceans are still warming, right? You know, it's just like when you turn the eye of a stove on, unless it's gas, it doesn't get instantly hot. It has to warm up. Same thing with a pot of water. It takes a little while to get it boiling. You turn the stove off, and then the boiling goes away and it gradually cools off. Well, the oceans are the same way. They store this heat every single day. And we're still warming those oceans just a little bit, especially in the tropics. And with nothing to have come along to mix all of that up, this could be problematic later on. So as far as impact goes, this tells me that folks in the Western Hemisphere, and you know that includes all the way out to Hawaii, of course, the Pacific coast of Mexico, the Caribbean islands, the United States, you know, the Western Caribbean, you name it, are all still very much at risk, even if we don't have a busy season ACE-wise, accumulated cyclone energy. And here is an easy way to think of it. Before we get to this, bring me back on one more time. And by the way, I'm going to try to do more where you see me, because it just makes me feel like I'm talking to you, not at you. Anyhow. So hi, you see a lot more of me, even though there's less of me to see. The beard's gone, and I'm trying to grow it back a little, and I've lost like 60 pounds, so whatever. Had to throw that in there, of course. One thing to really keep in mind, that the season doesn't have to produce a lot of activity, right? Just like in sports, all the team has to do is win when you're watching a game of your favorite sport. Football, basketball, whatever, doesn't matter. So, you know, your favorite basketball team, they only have to win by 1 point. They were supposed to win, the spread was more, right? The line, you know, was so-and-so by 12. You know, I'll use Duke over there, okay? And thumbs down on the day's video from some people. That's fine, you Carolina fans or whoever you are, Kentucky. But seriously, in sports and hurricanes, I'll tell you, that's my book one day. Forget, you know, a history of my career. It's going to be basketball and hurricanes, you know, and I live in North Carolina where basketball is a big deal, so that could go pretty well, I bet. But for real, try to follow along here as I go through this tangent. You only have to win by 1 point, you still win. Even though Duke or whoever was, you know, they were supposed to win by 16. And you'll see people grumble about that in sports, and this is so true. Well, you know, they won, but they only won by a point or two. They were supposed to beat so-and-so by a lot more than that, so maybe they're not as good as they thought. Well, think about 1992. Now, that's not a good analogy, but in this case, bear with me. That season was forecast to be below average, etc., but you had Andrew, and I know this is the whole it only takes one thing, but this is so very true. Last year was a fairly busy season overall, right? And there were two events that were extremely important in hurricane history now. Florence and Michael. That's two. They say it only takes one. Well, last year it was two. And that's all it was. Out of all the rest of the hurricane activity that we had, it was just those two. Does that make sense? So, yes, a very busy season like 2005, 2010, even 2008 was fairly busy if you think about it. And others. 2012 was busy. Those are interesting to track, hurricanes all over the Atlantic, etc. Absolutely. But when it comes down to it, impact, where are they going to track? And how strong will they be when they get there? And what are those impacts going to be? Nobody can tell you that ahead of time. That's the first rule. And then the second thing is you need to just be ready for that one time, because all it takes, you only have to win by one. And in this case, you could lose, because think about it. the one Cat 5 that we've had make landfall since Andrew was in Mexico Beach, Florida, and vicinity last year. It was just one. We haven't had a whole bunch of them. It was just one. So if that's in your backyard, that's bad. And I think we can all agree to that, right? All right, back to the task at hand here. I'm going to scroll on this. This is the Tropical Tidbits, again, site showing the 850 millibar level of the atmosphere. It's about 5,000 feet up. And the cyclonic vorticity. And you can see, I mean, look, see the spin in here? Look at those little wind barbs. This is 95E, this is 97E. And this is the model from the 12Z run. And if I go through, we don't have to use the slider, we'll just use the arrows. This is in 24-hour increments. And you see what happens there with that system. 95E, can track it right there. And you see that well off the Baja over Baja Peninsula. And then it kind of, what are we at, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. All right, so you see that? There you go. So let's go back, get rid of the telestration. And now we'll just kind of, come on. I like the software, but sometimes I forget to hit the escape key to give me my pointer back. And then I get the blue arrow. So see how that goes through. It curls up off the Pacific coast of Mexico and ends up well off the Baja overall. Not much development with 97E over here. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. You folks along the Baja here, you don't need Mark to tell you. I mean, hopefully you just know this already, is my point. Watch this carefully because you never know. We're getting towards the time of year, and there is a cold front coming up towards Northern California up here, way up to the north, that could weaken the ridge enough that maybe this gets closer to the Baja than the Euro is indicating, but we will certainly watch it. Did you notice something going on over here up towards Louisiana? Remember, I told you earlier that we need to watch this area because you folks in the Northwest Gulf might have to contend with it. Well, let's shift gears over to the Atlantic side, and I want you to keep your eyes on this area right here. That is the energy, as innocuous as it looks. This is your deep easterly to southeasterly flow coming across at 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. And all these yellow areas are little pockets of energy in the atmosphere. And there's 97L up there. It's defined in the model pretty good. But I want you to watch this right here. This is the box. I'll box it off. There you go. That's your keys to the game right there. Watch as this evolves. This is the initial map. This is Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, Friday morning. And you say, well, what? What is it? There it is right there. And before you go, oh, wow, man, better gas up the rental and head out there. Don't make fun of me. Come on. That's deep moisture. And look what happens as we go to day 4. A little bit more shading in here, and it's got that cyclonic turning overall. And that's my point here. It looks like some kind of an impact event over the next 5 days is coming out of this little system. Now, we all know that sometimes, Umberto 2007, I'm looking at you, these systems can flare up quicker than the models indicate. And there's just enough turning in this wind field in here. If you look at the barbs, you can see, I'm not making it up, you can see the wind flags in there and everything, that, we got to watch that. You see the evolution of it comes up, the source region is there, deep tropics, etc., into Louisiana and beyond. All right? Another area to keep your eye on. All right? So, right through here, energy stretched out for now, absolutely, but if we go through time, you see it start to try to come together just a little bit more in the northwest Bahamas in here. Innocuous, yeah, but a cluster of thunderstorms is probably what it'll look like. People will be talking about it. Mariners, and look, it too starts to develop just a little bit of curvature overall. You can just see the wind shift going on in there. A little cyclonic spin, weak as it may be, it still presents a problem. If you're going to go to vacation down there, you got a boat, you got a party you want to head out into the Bahamas for, whatever. all the marine interests, the small aircraft that are down there. This all matters. We're not just looking for hurricanes. If you just want hurricanes only, there's probably other channels out there that focus only on hype events. And that's fine. That's the beauty of this. You can follow whomever you like. But I see this and I say, okay, interesting. Things are not as quiet as they would appear. And if we go through time at 144 hours out, this is valid next Monday, look, right off the coast of the Carolinas, that's definitely curled up, more energetic. And by day 7, oh, wow, okay, there might be a tropical cyclone sitting off of Hatteras. Might not, but there might be, and that should get your attention. Because if it is, let's just pretend that this is a 40-knot tropical storm sitting in there, little L for low pressure. Let's just pretend for a minute. Anybody vacationing out here, or living out there, whatever, you're going to have some waves coming out, and that'll create rip currents, and those can kill people, and that's a problem. So we got to, obviously death is a big problem. So let's watch and see how this evolves over time. I'm just kind of looking at the rest of the run. Something else trying to sneak in by day 10, August 30th. So things are quiet when you look at the blue arrow. They're quiet when you look at this and this, right? But they're not as quiet as they would appear. It's not the same as nothing going on. All right, real quick, and then I'll sign off. It's been a long one. But hey, that's the other nice thing about this, is I can go as long as I want and try not to bore you too much along the way. I am on Patreon. Again, it is absolutely incredible what this platform allows a creator such as myself to do. Instead of pitching and saying, hey, sign up and help me out on Patreon, I want to just show you what they're doing today with their Share Your Studio Day. That's me in the studio here, and I keep the light bulb on the keyboard right there. That's a light bulb, and that's my inspiration, because when I have an idea, I hold the light bulb above my head and I go, yay, I got an idea about something. And these are the keyboards that I use, the synthesizers there, to do the music that I produce for my documentaries. And if you go to Amazon and check out Tracking the Hurricanes 2018, you'll hear that music. Every bit of it is done using those keyboards. And that mouse pad and mouse right there is literally what I'm using right this moment. And you can hear the clicking from time to time to do the update. So on their Share Your Studio hashtag from Patreon, that's my studio. And there's Patreon's site if you're not following them or know anything. If you don't know anything about it, check it out. It's a fantastic way to support people. There's other people's studios, podcasts, artists, animators, authors, gamers, you name it, and hurricane guys like me. Levi Cowan, I'd like to see him share his studio. That'd be cool. The Weather Nerds guys at weathernerds.org, I think it is. They are on there, and I'm sure there are other storm enthusiasts, trackers, weather geeks, or whatever, and I'm on there as well. And so if you're interested, yes, I'll pitch it a little bit. Patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. So there's my studio. All right. I am done. That's it from me for today. As always, I appreciate you. And even if you're not a patron, that's not a problem. The fact that you're following along and watching and you're talking about what I'm doing with your friends, maybe you share the video, I love every bit of it. Unfortunately, it takes money to make the world go round, so once in a while I'll have to ask you to help out in that department to keep me employed. But it is great to have you on that side of the screen tuning in to moi. All right? That's all the French you're going to get from me. I am Mark Seth of HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.